Okay, so we'll start with our session. There are still many that are joining, but we'll just start with it. So, hello everyone, welcome to today's session. So, this is one of the first series, Research Made Easy. This is particularly about how to go about research, since we have just started our NIRC initiative, NASA India Research Conference. So this is an initiative under NASA India Research Cell. So this year we'll be having a research conference at our annual NASA convention. So with that, we will be accepting research papers from students. But this time, the research papers, before to begin with it, we'll be accepting abstracts. Based upon the abstracts, we will be shortlisting few, and then we'll be going ahead with producing the full-fledged paper. The deadline to submit the abstract is near; it's on 16th. And that's why this session we are having today, it's about how to go about writing an abstract or getting to the research question. And so the session will be quite interactive. It won't be a typical lecture, but it will be more of question answer. So even if you have any questions, you can, in between also, if you don't understand any part of it, you can put it in the chat. We'll take all these questions in the end. So, so today we have Sir Architect Saptarshi Sanyal, sir. So about him, I'll just quickly read his very big bio, which is all his achievements and 1 minute. Okay. So today we are joining by, as I said, architect and Dr. Saptarshi Sanyal, an architecture historian, educator in architecture and conversation architect. His research lies at intersection of colonialism, modern architecture, the histories of work, building, and spatial production, and architecture authorship. His PhD, completed at Bartlett University College of London, was supported by the UK Commonwealth Scholarship 2018 to 2022, and his doctoral thesis won an honourable mention at the University of California at Berkeley's South Asia Art and Architecture Dissertation Prize 2023. His published works have appeared internationally in the UK, Brazil, Portugal, Switzerland, France, Australia, and the USA. In the journals as diverse as the Architecture Research Quarterly, Architecture Beyond Europe, Landscape and Context, and Space journals, among others, where he also serves as a peer reviewer. He currently also serves as serves on the editorial board of the Space Journal. In 2024, he co-founded PATIO, Platform for Architectural Transfers in the Indian Ocean Rim, a first of its kind independent scholarly network that fosters dialogue on intra and trans regional architectural histories by connecting early career researchers to established academics and institutions. So there are like a lot of others have joined in. I'll just briefly again put out this again. If you have, so this session is going to be about how to write an abstract and how to get to the research question. So this is like one of our first lessons of the Research Made Easy, and we have Dr. Saptarshi Sanyal sir here with whom we will be having a conversation on this topic. So if you have any questions in between, you can just drop in the chat. We'll take all your questions in the end. Okay. Sir, so thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you for having me, Harsh. It's quite a pleasure to do this for the first time with students.
Yes, sir. So this is, as I mentioned, it's like one of our first initiatives, and we actually are still the main aim is to like promote the research, uh, the concept of research and how to do research to the other colleges of architecture in India. The research is not that particularly taken up in many other uh, colleges. So I'll start with my first question. So is that many students, many architecture students in India focus heavily on design and studio work, and their technical skills are often neglecting research due to either lack of emphasis in their academic curriculum. In fact, many architecture colleges do not have research, as I said before, do not have as a research as an integral part of their program, leaving students with limited exposure to structured inquiry and critical analysis. So this initiative, we hope that it bridges the gap. But could you highlight the key benefits of uh, engaging in research papers, and not only for higher studies, but also for professional practices?
Okay, thanks for that very important question to begin with. So, see, I think one of the benefits, I'll start with something very obvious sounding, but I think research is done as much for enjoyment as it is done for, attaining professional goals. So I think one is, I think, I mean, I'll come at this in a very general way first, that, we all, as architects, we lead notoriously stressful lives, and we often don't have the time to sit and reflect about why we are doing what we are doing. So I think research is that space where we can step back a bit, have a kind of a pause, and think sort of reflexively about why our practice is the way it is, and where we've come from, where we're going. So that's one more sort of general reason. But I think research also gives us as architects and a certain kind of skill set that positions us very well to do what we do. Whether we like to build, whether we like to branch out into other fields of work, like creative fields like photography, filmmaking, writing, etc. Research gives us a certain it diversifies our skill set. Let me put it that way, because otherwise, as architects, we tend to focus very much on the acts of drawing, building, and being at site. But what happens when we pause and reflect? So there are certain other skill sets that are required. Even if somebody were to be a practicing architect who's going to work in an office and build, I think research is literally the starting point for us to be able to convince ourselves firstly, and then somebody else, that this is the right way to go forward. It's a process of gathering evidence. It's a process of gathering evidence that you position in relation to what action has to be done. Because research, often we think about problem solving in research, but I think research is more about explaining phenomena. It's about telling us that, okay, if our cities are ugly, I can give you an example that anybody would say that, oh, Indian metropolises are they don't look good, they don't feel good, and there's a sense of stress and you know anxiety, loneliness, all these factors exist in our cities, and yet we go about building the same things. How do we address these questions as a researcher? So a simple answer to the question is that if one were to even research this a little bit, we'll realize that we don't have a very important actor in the building process, which is namely the architectural critic. So if anywhere in the world, in civilized society, when an enormous project is built in a city, it is put under a lot of scrutiny first by, and not everybody, all the citizens or the residents of the city have enough time to go and look at the nitty-gritties of the project in detail. but it is the critic who actually positions themselves or himself or herself between the society's interests and what the architect might want to power through, or the client might want to power through. It's not about just keeping the architect in check, but it's also about putting like a large developer or a political actor in check. That's what the architectural critic does. So I'm saying this is just one of the examples where research serves an actual purpose that we can relate to. But I think a third reason would be really to develop skills in reading and writing, and I'll come to this in a moment in a little more detail. But I think as architects or architects in training, we also forget that a lot of our job entails writing and reading. We just think making the drawing and putting it out to sight is that's really the confines of the practice. But we prepare something called specifications, which is the act of writing as unambiguously as possible, right? Now, where does that skill come from? It comes if one reads things, figures out ways in which other authors have written with precision, and that's what trains us, or rather, it sets our bar high that, okay, I'm going to be able to write. So I think the fact that research occurs in a domain which is largely textual and figurative, and it might involve human activity that is immaterial in nature. That, I think, gives us very specific sets of skills and opportunities to employ in what we do as architects.
Yeah, so like that is very true that we often neglect that what in what ways we can the research can help us, and also like there are a lot of, apart from this benefit, how it can make us well positioned architect in the society for tomorrow. But I think for the students, it is also a good part to engage into this, because if they are going for their higher studies, they research, getting involved in research plays a very crucial part, and I think there are a lot of benefits also about it.
Yeah, I think that's very concrete and concrete in terms of its benefits, because I think if you're a good researcher, the opportunities that you have for higher degrees, apart from the first degree, which is a bachelor's degree, are actually quite limitless. They are competitive nonetheless, like anything is, but I think that is really what sets a good an architect, a graduate architect, getting into a world-class institution, as we like to put it, to a so-so institution, because a lot of the entrance processes for these institutions require us to write essays, and essays that reflect on our personal lives, our professional lives, our contributions, and what impact those contributions have had. So unless we have developed research skills or writing skills that allow us to, in a very economical way, in a very short space, be able to compellingly put these ideas forward. So that's like a practical benefit one can think of if they're thinking of higher degrees. And I can tell you from my own experience that to win very large funding, for your studies or for your research projects in the future as well, the ability to be able to write and convince somebody who is never going to meet you when they're reviewing that application. The only way you come across to them as a person is through what you've written. That's how you become like a real, human being in front of them, without even being, interacting with a person. So the writing has to have enough power to be able to break these sort of international and cultural boundaries, and be able to convince somebody who can relate to a problem that is happening in an informal settlement in New Delhi while they're sitting in the United Kingdom or in France or in the Netherlands. That that is the power that research training in research gives somebody. And I'm telling you, like, I'm talking about large scale funding applications. Like, the entire cost of my PhD might have been around £200,000. Okay, so, and that was something that I didn't have to pay a penny from there. That was literally based on 6 essays that I had to write, So that's the kind of scale of support that we're talking about. And it just comes through the medium of writing, to be able to write short, I think 500-word essays, And I never met the assessors of my application. I still, till date, I don't know who they are. But, and then you're competing with scientists, lawyers, doctors, and, historians, all sorts of things. That's the kind of, the ability to be able to research something, understand what is a broader issue that resonates with the world. Because often we tend to live in our own little bubbles within our schools of architecture or our cities or our cultural bubbles or so research also allows us to move outside that, to be able to read widely, to know what's going on in the world, what matters to people. I think that it brings us face to face with that. I mean, I hope everybody's comfortable about me talking in English, by the way. I just realized that I didn't ask that question. So maybe if we have a thumbs up from the audience, that might help. Yeah.
Okay. That's actually quite impressive, the way the scholarship about you just mentioned. Um, yeah, so it's quite evident that research is out there, but it's still not, many students are not aware about it. Or rather, many students shy away from the prospect of research in their academic pursuit, like probably because it's an elusive subject and a path not taken by most. What is the a common misconception about architectural research that you believe needs to be challenged or redefined?
Oh, I can think of one immediately, and I challenge a lot of my professional peers who are. So I just to give your audience some context, I am not an architect who builds anything anymore. I have done that in the past, but I literally function in a world where the act of building doesn't exist. I don't, apart from things that I do at home and my friends and family, I don't practice architecture in that sense. So this practice word is where the problem is. We think that practice and research are two different things. I think what most people mean when they say architectural practice is the professional practice of architecture. So the professional practice of architecture in our country, for instance, is bound by regulations that the Council of Architecture sets. So there's a legal framework. The Council also sets certain ways in which you can demand money. So there is a financial sort of structural framework through which your profession operates. And then there are certain moral and ethical obligations that you have to the client and society at large. This, however, is one kind of practice of architecture and not the only kind of practice. So research, for instance, is another kind of practice of architecture. Writing is another kind of practice of architecture. I mean, I can think immediately of, like, everybody sitting in this webinar might have heard of the architect Le Corbusier or something like that. Most people might not know that what he actually built is about 10% of how much he drew and wrote. His practice, so to speak, involved very little building. And most of it was about writing and drawing and, and researching things. So he researched things as widely as he was reading a lot of magazines at that point about tuberculosis. And a lot of people might not know that the modern architectural principles that he came up with of having white buildings and light colored things and no ornaments and all that, it comes from an anxiety about not having surfaces where dust can gather. And that did not come from like looking at other buildings that existed. That came because he was reading about what doctors were writing about, indoor air quality and stuff that is very common to our this thing. So what I'm trying to make Corbusier is one example. I can go on and on. Like I can talk about Archigram in India. I can talk about an architect like Gautam Bhatia, who is also, his written work has had more impact than his building work. So I think writing and researching it needs to be treated as a practice of architecture. I think that is the biggest myth that we are all fed from the moment we enter our architecture school to the moment when we graduate. And most people don't realize it throughout their professional lives. They think that practice of architecture means opening an office or working in a developer, an architect's firm, and making buildings at site. That is just one kind of practice. So that's like the biggest myth busting that I do both with my students and also my colleagues. Some of them don't like it because they think that somehow somebody who makes buildings is better than somebody who doesn't make buildings or just teaches. But I think that teaching architecture needs to be treated as a profession. Researching architecture needs to be treated as a profession. They are also bound by extremely sophisticated frameworks. They are bound by a financial dimension. They are bound by an ethical and moral responsibility to society. So somebody, and let me confess my bias as an educator over here, but as somebody who on a daily or a yearly basis, I impact 120 to 150 lives of future architects in, let's say 50% of them go on to become architects and 50% don't ever practice architecture in that conventional sense. But my job is a professional job. I do it with as much preparation, sincerity, and effort as somebody who's running an architecture office. How can somebody dare to say that this is not a profession and say that, if I'm only in an architecture firm, that is what makes me a professional and you're just a teacher? So that sort of caste system needs to be completely ruptured now. So there is a caste system that exists in architects that, you'll often find people, some of my colleagues also tend to do it, senior colleagues usually are 50 and above in age and who have built a few things will come and say, you have never built anything, what gives you the right to teach? I might argue that my students might never build anything, and that totally does not make them invalid as architects. Because, Leon Battista Alberti is known for one building that he's built. But his 10 books of architecture is read by the widest community of architects in the Western world. Are you going to say he's not an architect? Are you going to say, so that, I want to just offer that provocation to the room that, that there is a myth that architectural research is something that you do on the side. But architectural research can very well be a full-time job and it can earn you a living, Sometimes, and lead to a better quality of life sometimes than practicing architects. You don't develop health problems as a researcher as much as a practicing architect do. It's just an aside.
That is a very big myth that you have just broken, and I think it's very true that research and someone has commented sleepless night prevented.
Yeah, absolutely. You can I think work on a better routine that is in your control when you're a researcher, and not just answer phone calls and nowadays read AutoCAD drawings on your phone sent over WhatsApp. That might.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to invalidate or dismiss people who build, but I'm rather trying to underline the problem that is not the only way in which architecture can be done. Research is a way of doing architecture as well. So, I don't have any special enmity with my friends who are building and, working in architecture offices. Absolutely not. So I wish to say this because I don't want to be misunderstood or, create some kind of war between the person who builds and the person who doesn't build. But I think it's important for us to understand that just as I don't have a right to belittle somebody who doesn't write, an architect who builds doesn't have the right to belittle somebody who doesn't build.
Yeah, that is actually very true, and it's a very complete new perspective that we are getting to know. But now let's move to the next question is that many students are not aware of how to write a research paper, even if they are interested to, get involved into research, but how to start with it. Like the process can seem overwhelming without proper guidance. Like writing a strong research paper involves meeting several basic requirements, like such as understanding the research methodologies, structuring arguments, and most importantly, I think having a mentor or a guide to provide direction is also quite important. In NASA India Research Conference that we are doing, we have provided students with a niche topic, uh, which topic that uh, to build that is to build their abstracts, their to frame their abstracts. But even narrowing it down to a niche topic, it's like it remains a challenge for many. Like as an academician and who we have guided, who has guided research students in the past and who continue to do that. Like you have the first-hand experience with difficulties students face in this journey. Like, what are some of the fundamental challenges students encounter when attempting research for the first time? And how should they approach these challenges from selecting a focused research question to structuring their paper effectively? Like, what practical advice would you give the students struggling with the initial stages of research?
Um, I think there are two things that I have observed almost as a pattern when people try to identify a topic of research that they want to investigate and write about eventually. One is that they try to they get a bit pressured by what is trending. And often, original research is something that by default, and this might sound a little contradictory to what I'll say in a moment, but I think research is never impersonal. So I tell a lot of my students, and often this is work to their benefit, that they should research something that they deeply care about, something that bothers them. You can't research something that you can take a cold hard look at from a distance. A researcher is often very much present in the research process. They need to be, because moving forward into the research process can be very frustrating. You might not get the data that you're looking for. People might be unwilling to talk to you. So it's not that it yields immediate results. So I think that ability to sustain an interest in the process comes from something that bothers you. That I want to address this issue. That's one thing. So this is like, I've had students in the past who have you know been whose topics have been dismissed by others, saying that okay, this is not really an architectural topic. But just in the last academic year, which is I'm talking about 2023-24, I had two students, one of whom worked on architecture through literature, like novels, literally, and that was her data set, looking at novels, and another one looked at photographs that appear in architectural media and looked at photographs that appear in social media and did a comparative study. Now, these two topics were kind of cast out the window. And in the present academic year, I had a student who worked on cinema, who again, she was very apprehensive, and she was like, oh, by working on cinema, I'm not really solving an architectural problem. So it took like a good 3 to 4 weeks to get her to admit that this is something she cares about and is passionate about and wants to start researching, because a lot of people don't have confidence, maybe due to the exposure they have, maybe because people are telling them that this is not worth researching. Trust me, if you care about it and you know that there are people around you who you see care about it, if you with something that affects the life of people and it bothers you, somebody in the world is going to be, willing to support that research. You might not find them immediately, but I think that going with the conviction, and also because you grow as a researcher, you don't really, you come up with a very, you think you know the answer to something, but when you start researching it, you tend to get more and more confused. So my practical advice in that sense would be, if you're getting confused, if you're feeling lost, do not beat yourself up. Do not think that you are incapable of researching something, or that you don't possess the skills, or you're maybe worrying about something that nobody cares about. I don't think that is the case. Just go with what you know. But I would attach a disclaimer to it, or a caveat to it, that if you care about something, read as widely as you can about it. Even before you've begun the research, like just out of interest, find out what the conversation is. And I tell this to people that doing research literally is like entering a conversation. Imagine you're at a party and there's a group of the cool people you want to hang out with standing in a circle and talking about something. You don't straight away jump into the circle and start talking, right? What is the first thing you do? You start listening to what they're talking about and try to get to know what the conversation is before you start. So now think of it this in terms of the research process. Unless you have read widely enough around your area of interest, it could be anything. Like the people at the party could be talking about rock and roll music or pop music or something else, and you are interested in pop music, but you need to know what they're talking about before you can put forward your perspective. So similarly, if you're interested as a woman in urban safety, and the correlation of that to lighting on the streets, and and whether there are enough spaces in Indian cities that make women feel safe or not, which is an important factor that poses a barrier to women coming out and working. This is an issue that might bother you. It bothers millions of other women in the country or living in urban areas within the country. So read as widely as you can. What are people talking about? What could be the factors that affect it? What are the ways in which people are trying to solve it? How successful have they been? Where have they not succeeded? So all these issues really matter. When you're a researcher. So I think the most practical thing you could start with is actually read. When you are interested in a topic, find out what's going on everywhere about that topic. That's a very, very important place to start. And that will also eventually, I know we are going to come to abstracts in the research question. It also allows you to position your abstract to wider audiences that people might be interested in reading, because what the issues are. That these issues might not be unique to your city or your country, but they might be issues that are quite widespread in different parts of the world. So that to be able to create that connection and resonance, it's important to be able to know what the conversation is. I hope that answers part of your question at least.
Yeah, yes, sir. Actually, it's very true to choose a topic that interests you, because you get very dedicated to that topic. Because ultimately, I think when I was doing my research and that time, uh, the topic was of my interest and I could really relate to it, and I felt like I'm contributing something, even if it's like a small particle in big ocean. It just felt like contribution, giving a contribution to something, and which is, I think, which kept me going. Now that now that we have, first say we have given a theme, or like we have chosen a theme, we have chosen a topic. Now, as you said, that you need to understand, you need to read also before.
Can I jump in with one point? I think I missed this, and as you were talking, I just thought of it. One is, I think you said something very important, which I should have said, which is that start small. Don't think that you are going to change the world through your research project, which is done in 6 months or 3 years. All research is again always about a narrow problem that you can do. So you have to, I think the other practical thing a researcher should keep in mind when they're setting forth is, how much time do I have to do this? Is the data easily available? Do I have the resources to apply these kind of methods? I think those are other practical things that constrain what you can and cannot do. But the one thing that remains constant is, as a single researcher, you always start small. Eventually, when you become professional researchers, you collaborate with 5-6 people sitting in different parts of the world. Then you apply for grant funding and you have more money, you have more time. That's when you start coming at it from the bigger. But at speaking to the audience that are here, I think you need to start small. You need to start with something very, very specific, something that is immediately accessible to you, something in your observable environment. I think that's quite critical, because otherwise it's no use setting up a research that cannot be completed in a fixed amount of time, that cannot be completed in the budget that I have, that cannot be completed in the amount of time I can give to it. I might be an architecture student, like your upcoming NIRC abstract is something that I think students should also evaluate. Okay, am I able to give like 10 hours in the next 2 days, or 20 hours in the next 2 days, or how much time can I take to write this essay? That will shape what you can and cannot do. Because I think a lot of people, when they're setting out, they think about breadth. They think of impact as, oh, what's going to happen. Like, I will learn how to build on the moon, or I will uncover the relationship of music and architecture. That is not practically possible in 5 months. Okay, so I think if you want to do music and architecture, can you think of a specific piece of architecture built by an architect who might formerly have been a musician? Example being, say, Daniel Libeskind, who was a pianist till the age of 55, and then so there, you're answering the broader question of music and architecture's relationship, but you're researching something very, very specific, something very tangible and concrete. Anyway, I just thought that should have been added to my earlier response.
Yes, so that is one very important point, and coming and I think that is quite necessary to students to understand. Otherwise, if they have a particular ambition and which is like unachievable, then they start losing out interest in executing that research, and they might just fall out of doing it. So I think as a beginner in research, you should take smaller steps, then build that confidence to address bigger challenges in coming days. So now that students have understood, okay, now the topic is there. So now what should be the next step for them to proceed? Like, how should they break down the given topic or given theme to identify a relevant and focused research question, and what are the essential steps that they should follow? Like, could you outline a few step-by-step approach or a roadmap for the students?
I think every research question has a particular structure, So, I mean, if you allow me to share my screen, I'm going to and I welcome everybody to take screenshots if you want. These are lectures that I give to my students usually. But hang on, just give me 30 seconds. Do I have the rights to share the screen?
I'll just check.
I think I do. It's showing up now.
Yes, yeah, now.
Okay. Are you able to see my screen now? There should be a white slide with subject written on it.
Yes, we are able to see.
Okay. So this is something technical, and before I go into the technicalities of it, I think I'll need to tell you that a research question is very different from a topic. A topic is like the broader zone of something that you might be interested in, whereas a question is something directed at particular phenomena, and necessarily the research question is about the impact or relationship of one phenomena or thing to another phenomena or thing. Okay, so this is sounding very like a lot of gas, I know, but it'll become very clear to you in a second. And I show you. So a research question necessarily always has a subject, right? And so the subject is immediately followed by a kind of operation. So subject is that thing or phenomena that is happening, having an impact or an operation. It's operating upon an object. Okay, so it's just simple English language. Like, there's a subject, verb, object. So there is something that impacts something else. And then there is usually, and this is very important, that this is not the subject, operation, object is never located in the universe. It's located in a particular context. It's located, that context could also be certain conditions, that could also be certain groups or constraints, right? That constraint could be given by what place you're investigating, and since we're architects, everything we do is located in time and place. And it could also be social groups, like you can be like so a typical research question. Let me point it out through in a mathematical sort of abstract way first, that it will always be some kind of what kind of impact does X, or in what ways does X impact A or A and B, and the operation is in what ways does it impact. So the subject is X and the object is A on which the impact is happening. What ways does it impact or relate to is the operation, right? And the constraint could be at place Y during the time period or span Z. And constraints can also emerge as a group of people or things in a place or time period. So this is very important, that unless you relate to you relate it to a time and a place or a group, it's very difficult to actually create a research focus. So let me go over some very quick examples. And okay, let me talk about my favorite example first before I look at the other ones. So imagine that I'm a zoologist. I research birds, and I want to find out what crows eat. Crows, bird that is all around us. So if I ask a question, what do crows eat? It is not going to be a research question, because what do crows eat can have infinite possible answers, right? It does not relate one phenomena to another phenomena. But if I ask the same question as, do crows prefer non-vegetarian scraps to vegetarian scraps in the city of Delhi, I have immediately asked a research question. Because for me, what kind of things do crows prefer? I've created the operation of preferring. I have the subject, which is the crow. I have the object, which is vegetarian or non-vegetarian scraps. And I have the constraint or condition, which is the city of Delhi. I could add a further condition to it, like saying, do they prefer non-vegetarian scraps in winter and summer and so on and so forth. So I could fix the time period as well, right? So let's look at some of these examples to make it clear that, so what effect does social media have on people's minds, and what effect does daily use of Twitter have on the attention span of under 60s? Now see, both of them are answering pretty much the same thing, but one is a research question and one is not a research question, right? So within the second case, which is a research question, the operation is the effect on the attention span. Can you see my cursor now? The operation is the effect on the attention span. The subject is the daily use of Twitter. Daily use of Twitter is one phenomena. It is having an impact or an effect on the attention span, right? Effect on the attention span, and constraint or object is basically of under 16s. Now you see how in this particular way, the sequence, I'll just go back, it doesn't always have to come in this sequence. The sequence could be hidden in the question that you frame, right? So again, another example, why is there a housing crisis in the Netherlands? Now this, why is there a housing crisis in the Netherlands, can have like multiple infinite answers and it can never be completed. But if I constrain and if I make it specific, what impact have university internationalization policies had on the availability and affordability of housing in the Netherlands? Immediately, that becomes a research question. Again, it has the same kind of structure to it. It has a subject, which is the internationalization policies here are having an impact on the availability and affordability. So of housing, right? So housing becomes the object, the impact on availability and affordability is the operation, the subject is international policies, the country that you're looking at, tiny country, Netherlands, so you can investigate it all together. So Netherlands roughly is a little larger than Kerala, so you can just take it as a constant. I mean, it doesn't work for India. So I have a lot more examples. I won't go into all of them now. So this is, again, let's look at another urban planning kind of example. So has there been an increase in homelessness in San Francisco in the past 10 years? Now, any question that can be answered with a yes or no is not a research question. A research question, it necessarily has a layered and a complex answer. It can't be answered in a simple yes or no. It's not a binary thing that can say, oh, this is what it is, this is so. In that way, it is not a mathematical equation necessarily. So here in this case, has there been an increase in homelessness in San Francisco in 10 years? The answer to this will always be yes, okay, in San Francisco's case. But then if you focus it and say that, okay, economic, political, and social factors in San Francisco, in that case, homelessness in San Francisco is the object. That is homelessness, the effect is being had on homelessness. What is having an effect? The subject, which is the economic, political, and social factors, right? The operation here is affecting the patterns of homelessness. And where is it happening, or what time period is it happening? It's happening in San Francisco over the last 10 years. Anyway, so I'll stop with the examples now, and I hope you could do, this is something that I have found out after surveying thousands of research questions, that it does always fall within this structure. You will have these elements. So anybody who's looking to answer a research question for your abstract would do well bearing this in mind. Anyway, so I hope that helps the people who are here.
Yes, so I think that is a very elaborative, it's a very elaborative structure that you have explained right now, that a good research question has the subject, object, operation, and constraints, and which is maybe that many of us do not, even to write a research question becomes a very big task. So that answers it. But my next question is that how, now that we have a research question, or even to get to a research question, there like we require some kind of abstract. So what is an abstract? And in the abstract writing, like what are the things that we should not miss, and we should, like a checklist, okay, this needs to be there. Like, can you help us to understand like how to properly structure an abstract which is like a shortlisting worthy?
Okay, good. So everybody is going to be put in an equal footing. So firstly, I want to say there is no one formula for writing an abstract, but you have to, I think, first think a little bit about who the audience of an abstract is. Okay, so an abstract must necessarily resonate with a wide amount of people. It can't be, and when I say wide amount, I'm not saying that there is one abstract that an architecture student will write that will resonate with an economist, and it will resonate with a journalist and a doctor. So that's not what I mean. I mean, does it resonate with a wide enough people in my community, in people? So I can again share some examples, but before I talk about the examples, let me say that an abstract is typically written twice. Okay, the first time you write an abstract, you are writing it prospectively. So because if this is a conference abstract, you have not yet fully done the research, the abstract tries to anticipate what the results are going to be. In that case, it is left open-ended. Right? But if you write an abstract for a journal, for a formal publication, that abstract that would typically be written after the research has been completed. Okay, so I think it's important to know at what stage of having done the research. So many of the people in the audience here might have already done something that they want to write about. So there, the job of the abstract is about positioning it within the larger conversation. Like the first thing you need to say, let's say, if I speak about it in very non-specific terms, there's a really funny template of writing a good abstract, which is everyone agrees that this issue is important. This is a first line. But this particular problem within the issue has not received enough attention. And then you say, I'm going to use this kind of data, I'm going to use these methods, and these are the possible results that I have uncovered by using this data and treating them via these methods. And finally, you say the results that I have found, they are significant because they speak to that bigger issue back. So this is a very, very non-specific way of putting it. But let me now get to the examples and see what this translates into. I'm going to give an example from a recent conference paper I presented, not to a group of architects, but a group of people who work on the history of construction. Okay, so remember that the audience for this is not architects. They are usually scientists. They are people who are civil engineers, and they are writing the history of construction, right? And I'm talking about an architectural project. So this is partly from my PhD. There's this one building that I researched. I'm going to just share my screen, Harsh, once again, okay? Okay, are you able to see this? I'm going to just try and zoom in so that it is visible to... Is it bigger now, what I'm looking at?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this was a paper I presented last summer in Zurich. It's called Labor or Work, and it's about remembering. So the title also must be catchy enough. So this particular project, which is the Golconda Dormitory, and it's located in Pondicherry, which everybody knows. Golconda Dormitory, not many people might know. And this was a very strange project. So now I'm almost doing a social experiment because people will not know about what I'm going to read. Right? And remember, this is directed at a group of people. It was presented for the 8th International Congress on Construction History. So it's a very different field from architecture. So let's try and analyze, or my reflections on the first, on parts of the abstract. Very few building projects reveal as unusual a trajectory as the Golconda Dormitory does, right? So a short sentence like this can create intrigue, which is that, what is so unusual about it? The reader might ask, very few building projects, and here I'm talking about literally building projects across the world, right? Then I get down to the facts. I'm not yet answering what is so unusual about it in the abstract. Then you lay down some facts, because again, these are people who are not familiar even with Pondicherry or India or where it lies on the map. So I give the dates of the project, when it was built. So 1935 and 1948, realized between 1935 and 1948. This impeccable looking modern structure has intrigued architectural experts due to its formal characteristics and environmental performance. So immediately, the second sentence itself, you have provided quite a bit of background information. You've said when it was built, you said what is so special about it, it's an impeccable looking modern structure, and what impact the structure has had, and why has it had that impact. Formal characteristics, environmental performance, right? So look at this, this is literally like a I think an 18 or 20 word sentence, but look at the information that it packs into it, right? Now, coming to the what is special about it. Yet, the story of its construction, one not obvious from its appearance or performance, remained untold. Right? So immediately I've brought the reader back, I've hooked the reader back, saying that there is something about the story of its construction. Right? Now I move between, then I say, peeling away these outer layers, however, a rich and textured history of how Golconda was actually built appears. So I've said that by the time I've reached sentence 4, I've already told them what I have done, right? Then I again move into, I don't want to lose the reader. So I'm saying the project's patrons, which were leaders of a spiritual community or ashram, in Pondicherry, configured the construction process as an outer realization of a spiritual pursuit. Suddenly you have the reader thinking, what the hell has happened? There is a spiritual pursuit, and that is connected to a construction process. So immediately they know that this is, and that idea of it being an unusual trajectory is established literally 3 sentences later. They don't have to wait too long, right? And what has happened by connecting the construction to a spiritual pursuit? The profound meaning and significance thus ascribed to the act of building provides a critical apparatus to uncover the palpable experiences of Golconda's largely amateur workforce, an unlikely combination of mostly seekers within the ashram and a few trained professionals. Which means This spiritual pursuit means people who were not trained in building and only a few professionals, the paper is about their experiences. And this is a largely amateur workforce. So these builders persisted with producing a structure and a material unfamiliar to them, reinforced concrete. Remember, this is 1935 to 1948, so reinforced concrete is not a very common material. And all its other components, all with considerable precision. Right? So even though the workforce was completely amateur, they were like, lay people, they built it with precision. Now, the last couple of lines will say what is the method that I've used. Analyzing records that this workforce left behind helps to forge a narrative where Golcon's material operations, in effect, become legible through the human relations underpinning them. Then the content of the paper. In such a narrative, the people enacting these operations appear as vividly as the things they sought to create, which means that I'm saying that the paper is not about the object, the paper is about the people. The paper therefore proposes that the term labor proves inadequate to describe these builders and their efforts, as it presumes built objects to be transactions. So labor and transaction is the conceptual thing. Rather, Golcon's project narrative is better understood as one of work, which is a far more inclusive conceptual frame to explain the culture of its construction. Right? So this, everything I read out, the length of this total abstract is 200 words. Right? And I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not going to, if I read an abstract written by an undergraduate student, I will not expect this level of clarity to it. But still, I think the basic elements are there. It should describe what is special about the paper. It should describe one important thing that people miss while writing an abstract is they don't provide enough specific information. They don't provide the time, they don't provide the location, they don't provide the name of an architect, they don't provide the name of the building, right? They only write in the conceptual zone. But that is a very effective way to lose your reader completely. Because a reader doesn't think in the abstract. A reader wants example. The reader wants specific pieces of information. They want to know what time, they want to know where it's located. If you're talking about a tribal population and their negotiation of the climate crisis, they want to know where these climates are, where these tribes are located, why they're important. So my singular piece of advice in writing an abstract to everybody is be specific. Even though, so you have to economize your word count in a way that you give enough specific information but don't lose conceptual clarity. So a good strategy to write is try and alternate your sentences between a conceptual idea and a specific piece of information. That way you don't tire out the reader. If the reader is only presented with information, they're going to keep asking, why am I reading this concept? Where is the concept? If they're only presented with concept, line after line after line, they're like, but what does this actually relate to? Remember that the abstract is not being written for yourself to read. It's being written for somebody else to read, and they don't know who you are. All these abstracts are submitted and they are blind peer reviewed. They don't know the name of the author. It's like the board exams in India. Like, you don't know whose paper you're checking, you don't know who your examiner is. That is a double blind peer review, right? So that is a very, very important thing. So keep it specific, keep it intriguing. Like, always think of what is the hook, what can matter to somebody sitting in Zurich and reviewing this paper.
Okay, so to just summarize, what not to forget is about all the specific information, the required time and everything, and what time it is based on, and also summing up the methodology in the end of it, at least somewhere in the end.
Yeah, I also refer to, I've said I've analyzed historical records left by those who built it. So that is immediately telling them about what data I have used. And the conceptual focus, which is labor and work. So write a provisional title. Don't think of it as a final title. Keep the title very short. Make sure that it doesn't, like labor and work, the main title, it's a tiny title. It's 3 words. And then the subtitle usually gives the information about, okay, labor and work, where, what, which project, that is what the subtitles function is.
Okay. So you also mentioned that there are twice the abstract is written. One is while proposing, and once you actually start the groundwork, when you start to write the research paper, and at the end also then you refine your abstract later.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in the first step of first abstract, like how should you even conceptualize that abstract is like a very vague question, but I think that this is also something that we struggle to.
I think start out with the assumption that it matters to people. I think that's where the reading widely is okay. Say my topic or general area of interest is how indigenous communities respond to rising water levels, let's say, and how do they change their houses. Now, something like this, whether you speak about it in Assam or Kerala or Madhya Pradesh, it is something that will appeal to everybody in the world, right? So you need to make it relatable to people. Right? So there is a little bit that comes with experience. And here I want to add one more thing. Don't think of your writing process as an isolated thing. Always have friends around you, interested friends, not friends who will say, "Oh, what the hell are you doing?" Nobody cares. Have friends who are going to empathize with your efforts and talk to people. I think one of the biggest mistake that researchers make is that they think it's something done solo. It's actually never that. It's quite the opposite. In fact, it is good practice to take people into confidence, make yourselves vulnerable to people who will be critical of you and who will be skeptical of you. I do that on a daily basis because I'm around students every day. The students by default don't think I have anything special to offer. So a lot of my job involves I come in with like this insecurity. Oh, today I'm going to give a lecture. Do you think people are going to actually care about it? 19-year-olds who are distracted by social media. So my level of preparation has to match that. So an abstract is a simpler version. Here you have sympathetic people. Remember, everybody is your friend. Everybody is interested in what they have to say. They are not out to trip you. You're not out to dismiss what you're saying. All we are concerned about is, are you doing it rigorously enough? And that, in the beginning, it's kind of hard to determine whether it's effective. By the way, this applies also to the research question. The research question, when you write it before doing the research, is a prospective research question. It is what you think you're going to do. After having done the research, after you might set up a research question, then you might go to an archive or an office and you suddenly find there's no data on this. But there is data on this other thing. So you start with what data is available. You might then say that, oh, is this data still appropriate to answer a question close to that? It might not be that exact question. So you complete the research, having that provisional research question in the background. After you've completed the research and you've arrived at the results, that is the moment at which you return to the question and you say that, oh, have I actually answered this question or have I answered a different question? Then you rewrite the question. And there is absolutely no shame in doing that. It is completely valid. Your research is valid if you have written the research question in the end of doing your research. It is even encouraged. And I'm speaking from like a global, international experience. You'll have to just take my word for it. People are not going to judge you or dismiss your work if you have written the research question in the end.
Thank you so much, sir, for that. I think now we'll take questions from students.
Yeah.
So one of the questions is,
yeah, I was thinking it's good if people have the option of just coming on screen and asking what they have written if they're comfortable with that.
Yeah, they can. They
You
can.
can put out their names and then they can just
maybe just raise your hands if you have any doubts. Like I can see two questions in the chat box. You can directly ask, sir.
Yeah. Karan Rawat, are you with us still?
Yes.
Hello. Hi, Karan. Nice to see you.
Hello, sir. Good to see you too, sir. So my question was, how can the principles of critical regionalism in architecture can be classified based on specific time, specific purpose, and a specific location?
Okay, so I like the specificity of the question and also that it has elements of specificity in it. Firstly, critical regionalism is often treated as a timeless theory, which it is not. Critical regionalism emerged in a particular moment in time in the 1970s in Greece. Okay, and it's often falsely associated with Kenneth Frampton in the late 1980s and 90s. So critical regionalism was trying to react to the fact that the international style had matured to quite an extent by then, and they were a group of teachers in Athens Technical University were finding it difficult to teach their students architecture. So these people were Alexander Zonis and Leon Lefebvre. So Alexander Zonis is an architect, Leon Lefebvre is a sociologist, right? So they coined the term critical regionalism in a 1977 essay called The Grid and the Pathway. So they actually spoke about critical regionalism as an antidote to the international style. So critical regionalism then became adopted in different contexts in different ways. So the Americans saw the critical regionalism in a very different way, and their vernacular was like different districts in, say, Mississippi or New England, and the housing that happened in the suburbs. They saw that as vernacular architecture, whereas the Greeks were looking at something a lot more, connected to their technological concerns at the time as critical regionalism. If we sit in India and start thinking about critical regionalism, critical regionalism, one part of your question says, is there a specific location or purpose? There isn't. The answer to that is no, because critical regionalism looks different in different places. Critical regionalism in Kerala and Tripura are not going to look the same, right? So another point I want to make here is region is also a multi-scalar concept. When you talk about region in terms of, say, the Indian subcontinent, you can say there is the northeast, there might be Kashmir, there might be central India, there might be the Coromandel coast, Western Ghats, there might be Bengal, Gangetic. These are all one scale of region, right? There is also region which happens at the city planning level, and all of us are familiar with it, called the National Capital Region, which is NCR. Right? So region can also be very small like that. Now, it can also grow larger than that. Region can also become Southeast Asia or Asia Pacific. That becomes a very large region, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that critical regionalism effectively became the same thing that it was trying to avoid, because it tried to say that, oh, there is this, because where just the way international style happened. International style, the term was coined in the 1930s. At that time, the largest land area in the world, there were no nations, there were only colonies. Right, so I think Anthony King spoke about it as it should be called intercolonial style or inter-imperial style rather than international style. Where are the nations? Right. So similarly, because the region is not a fixed concept, therefore critical regionalism is also not a fixed concept, and it should be treated almost in terms of it should be very malleable and flexible rather than a template or a formula. I hope that answers your question, Karl.
Yes, sir. So we can't narrow it down to a particular aspect, but it itself opens up.
Yeah. It's not like a principle. It's more of a principle or an approach rather than a specific stylistic thing or a specific. It doesn't have an appearance. Critical regionalism in the work of Chitra and Vishwanath today, it is quite regional and critical. If I were to give you an example, in the 1960s and 70s, Laurie Baker's work might have been very critically regionalist, and it was being practiced even before the term critical regionalism originated. Because another thing I tell students is that often practice precedes theory. Theory is a reflection on what is already going on. There is no theory that is then applied to practice. Theory is a way of explaining a certain kind of practice. So there is this temporal cyclicality, that practice comes, theory comes, then it changes practice again, becomes a new kind of theory. So that has happened with critical regionalism as well.
So in the firm which I'm working in, actually they kind of practice that critical regionalism. So they first go to the site, they find out the materials which are locally available. They find the purpose of the construction, like why the construction is happening, and then they find out like what is the main idea, like what the client wants. What is the view? Does he want a fancy space? Does he want some cozy space just for himself? So basically, this is what they are practicing. And if I want to show this in the paper, maybe through the case studies. So I can I do that? Can I present that in the paper?
Absolutely, you can. I mean, I think because what your potential that I see in that is that it can push forward the understanding of what we mean by critical regionalism, right? And for the 21st century, located in wherever you're located and wherever these projects are located, that it can push it could answer the bigger question of what does critical regionalism mean to us in 2025, does it have a different meaning to what's original meaning was, and then does it still remain critical regionalism, or does it usher in a new understanding of critical regionalism? So all
maybe it turns out to something else too.
Yeah, absolutely. So that can often be left open-ended when you conclude that it pushes or it leaves further room for reflecting on critical regionalism, something like that.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Let's. Okay. Was someone asking question?
Okay, one second. Let me just switch this to that other view right now.
Okay. There's a question by Aishwarya Sahu.
Okay.
Are you there?
Aishwarya Sahu, are you with us?
Okay, we'll take question by Asya Ahmed.
Yeah, Asya Ahmed is just raised.
Asya Ahmed, are you there?
Okay, so Yashwarya has said her background is too noisy and she would like. Okay, so without her talking, we can read the question. I'm concerned about how to take advantage of opportunities like UC Berkeley. Is there a community I can join and stay informed? Yes, Yashwarya, I think you should join as many academic communities as you can, because a lot of these things you come to know, connect with like-minded people on even professional social media like LinkedIn and things like that. Lots of times you get to know that these things. So how I got to know about the UC Berkeley Prize, for instance, is I met a colleague in an online seminar, and then I started following him on Twitter or something else, and then I realized that he won this prize. So that's how I came to know of the existence of one such thing. And then I looked at and then I joined the mailing list of the South Asia Institute. So it's not there is not one community. I think you should be in multiple communities. Most of the time you're going to get mails that would be quite useless, but something might just crop up from there. Lots of job opportunities. I've also had my partner tell me about things that, because she's subscribed to so many things, and she's like, hey, this might be relevant for you. So those things happen a little bit by chance. I hope that answers your question, Yashwarya. Okay, it does. So we had Aisha, I think, next. Sorry. Harshvardhan, you're muted, I think.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Asia, would you like to ask the question or shall we move on?
We'll move on.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay. So no more questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time, and it was indeed a very...
Hey, there's one other question that popped up from Riya Agarwal.
Okay.
Are there any concrete research-oriented avenues one chooses to pick that as their career trajectory? Riya, yes. The answer to that is a resounding yes. There are concrete research opportunities. I am a living evidence of that because that's literally what I do professionally. I told you that I don't run an office. I don't. I am attached to an academic institution now. I might be somewhere else in the future, but that's my full-time job. I am a professional architectural researcher and an educator, and I think I do practice when I can, but that's not really my main thing. I think it's also about mapping where you see yourself going, and you'd be surprised. And I also want to reassure a lot of people here that when I was an undergraduate student, I used to scoff at researchers myself, thinking that this is not real architecture, and that came from my own ignorance. And there was nobody to tell me like I'm telling you now that research can be a career option. So I wish somebody had done that before, because it meant that I lost several years trying to just figure out what to do in my life and jumping from one place to another. And I've make no mistake, I've learned quite a bit from even doing things that I didn't want to do. I think that is the main thing. But yeah, I think whether you're passionate about research or not, it's something that you realize over time. You realize that you want to ask questions that nobody seems to be paying attention to, but you think they matter. That's what makes you a researcher eventually, in the long term. Dissertation, exoskeleton. Oh, one sec. I'm gonna ask you. This is Abhinesh Kumar, who's asking about exoskeletons. Hang on. Just give me a second. So there is a researcher whose work, Abhinesh, I'm replying to your question, whose name is Ram Shergill. He's a good friend, and he's I think finished his PhD in the Bartlett, and he has worked on exoskeletons in his PhD research. You should definitely read what he has written. Another researcher who works on this idea of the human and non-human sort of combining together and becoming like a technological cyborg. I'm going to type the name, is Donna Haraway, who has actually written something called a cyborg manifesto. So cyborg manifesto is her take on what's going to happen, and it was written, I think, in the 1990s, if I'm not mistaken, about what technology is going to do to our bodies, our lives, and and how it is now become impossible to separate the human from the technology. I mean, this is the biggest example. This is almost attached to our hand for the whole time that we are awake, except when we go to sleep or when we are using our hands to eat. We are like this is an extension of our hand. And similarly, there are many such technologies embedded in our lives. I can think of the ear pods. We are now one in the material sense with technology, and I think that is really, what Haraway is talking about. But do look up the work of Ram Shergill, who's working on exoskeletons. Not necessarily exoskeletons, again, is a very wide subject. I'm just putting a link in the chat. This is Ram's research, which you can check out, Abhinesh.
We have one more question, and let's take it as our last question for the day.
Yeah.
How open-ended can the abstract be for a topic like regionalism? How can we be very specific about it?
I think I discussed this earlier when we spoke, but being specific is try and locate it in a time and a particular place. Because when we're talking about regionalism, again, like I said, the idea of region is not fixed, right? So a region can mean a very different thing depending on what your focus is or which place you're focusing on. And a region also means different things in different periods of time. Look at for instance, the idea of a region called the Gaza Strip right now. When the war ends, we don't know, for instance, how long it's going to go on for. But will the boundaries of Palestine and Israel remain the same 10 years from now? They're going to keep shifting. So similarly, even though we think of India as one unified territory today, it was actually a patchwork of territories less than even 100 years back. So in 1931, if you ask the Maharaja of Travancore and the Maharaja of Tripura or the Nizam of Hyderabad that, hey, all you guys are going to be one country, they would have said, no, we are not. We are different regions. We are different territories. We have different systems of administration. So that is what I meant by being specific. It should be necessarily, spaces change depending on times. Spaces are not fixed spaces. Think of weekly markets, that lie on roads. Think of, I'm sitting in Delhi, I was in Daryaganj last evening, then there is a book market that happens, second-hand book market on Sundays. That space is no longer the same space as it is. Even our roads, like Google Maps is a fantastic example of that. The blue line changes into the red line depending on which hour of the day you're looking at. If it's peak hours, office traffic, that's very same space as very different characteristics. Anyway, I hope that answers your question, Ashwi Chen. It's 33.
Likhit, can you please remove that person? Okay. I'll take the further questions to, you can text me the further questions. I can take it to sir and get back to you on it. Okay, if that works. Should Shishti there?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, as we come to the end of today's first of our session, that is Research Made Easy, that is the lesson 1, Architecture and Research, getting to the research question, I'd like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed speaker, architect and Dr. Saptarshi Sanyal sir, for sharing his invaluable expertise and perspectives. The discussion has reinforced the crucial role of research in shaping architectural thought and practice, whether through academic inquiry, design, experimentation, or disciplinary collaboration. Like platforms like NASA India Research Conference are somewhat trying to pave a way for innovative and impactful contributions to the field. We encourage all of you to continue exploring, questioning, and contributing to the evolving landscapes of architecture. If you'd like to stay connected, follow this initiative, submit your abstracts. The deadline is close. It's 2 days away, but maybe this session would now give you a proper idea how to write an abstract and how to go about it. Do use these learnings and submit your abstracts on time, and let's see how we go about it in future. We are going to have multiple sessions like this where we would be talking about the learning how to do research, and it will be interesting. I hope that you guys found today's session interesting. It We tried to keep it interactive for a reason, and we are happy to see your response with such a niche questions coming from your end. Yes.
Okay, thanks Harshvardhan for having me with you. And it's a great initiative, and I wish you guys all the best and all the others who are going to be writing their abstracts very soon. And I wish there was something like this when I was an undergrad student. So I'm slightly envious of everybody who's here today. But thank you everyone for your participation and your questions.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take off then. All right.
Sure.
Bye.